It was a bright, sunny afternoon in the bustling downtown area. Alex Carter, a tall, confident man in his late 30s, walked out of a popular cafe, holding a to-go cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. Dressed in a sharp navy suit and polished shoes, Alex looked like someone with an important job, because he was. What nobody around him knew was that Alex worked as a Secret Service agent, tasked with protecting some of the most powerful people in the country. As Alex approached his sleek black sedan parked along the curb, he noticed two police officers standing a short distance away. They were talking quietly, but their eyes kept shifting in his direction. Alex felt a slight unease but brushed it off. He was used to attention, though not usually this kind. Just as Alex opened his car door, one of the officers called out, "Hey, you there, stop." Alex paused, turned around calmly, and met the officer's gaze. "Is there a problem, officers?" he asked politely, his voice steady and professional. The taller of the two officers, whose name badge read Officer Briggs, frowned as he approached. "We need to ask you a few questions," Briggs said firmly. His partner, Officer Carter, followed closely, his hand resting on his belt. Alex raised an eyebrow. "Of course. What's this about?" "You match the description of a suspect in a robbery nearby," Officer Carter said, glancing at Alex's car. "Black male, wearing a suit, driving a luxury vehicle." Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I assure you, that's not me. I just came out of the cafe." "You're mistaken," he said, keeping his tone respectful but firm. The officers exchanged a look. "We're going to need to see some ID," Briggs said, his tone less polite now. Alex calmly reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out his wallet. He handed over his government-issued identification, which clearly stated his name and position as a Secret Service agent. Briggs glanced at it, then scoffed. This could be fake. Alex took a deep breath, his patience beginning to wear thin. "Officers, I'm telling you the truth. I'm a federal agent. You're making a mistake." But the officers weren't listening. They saw only what they wanted to see, a man they had already decided was suspicious. "Turn around, hands behind your back," Briggs ordered. "What? You can't be serious," Alex said, his composure starting to slip. "Check my credentials. Call my office. This is a huge mistake." But Briggs and Carter weren't interested in hearing more. In seconds, Alex found himself being handcuffed as bystanders gathered, some pulling out their phones to record. Alex's mind raced. How could this be happening? He had spent years serving his country, putting his life on the line, and now he was being treated like a criminal for no reason. The murmurs of the small crowd grew louder. Some people looked outraged, while others whispered among themselves. Alex stood silently as the officers led him to their patrol car, his thoughts focused on staying calm and finding a way to fix this situation. As the car door slammed shut, Alex thought to himself, "They'll regret this once they realize who I am." Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a series of events that would shake the city and the country to its core. Alex sat quietly in the back of the patrol car, his hands still cuffed behind him. The soft hum of the car's engine couldn't drown out the frustration boiling inside him. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind. How had his identity, his truth, been so easily dismissed? But Alex knew he had to stay calm. Losing his temper wouldn't help him. And he wasn't about to let this mistake define him. The officers in the front seat were silent, their faces stern as they drove to the station. Alex could see Officer Briggs glance at him through the rearview mirror every so often, but neither of them spoke. Alex's thoughts shifted to his team at the Secret Service. He knew they would realize something was wrong when he didn't check in. His supervisor, Agent Daniels, was sharp and wouldn't ignore his absence. When they arrived at the station, Alex was led inside. The station buzzed with activity, officers coming and going, phones ringing, and conversations filling the air. But as Alex was walked through the building, heads turned. Some officers looked curious, while others seemed indifferent. Alex kept his posture straight, refusing to show any weakness. "Put him in holding," Briggs ordered one of the officers at the desk. Alex turned to him, his voice steady. "You need to verify my credentials. I've already told you. I'm a federal agent. You're making a huge mistake." Briggs smirked. "You can tell that to the sergeant when he's ready to talk to you." Alex felt a wave of frustration, but held his tongue. Arguing now wouldn't help. He was led to a small holding cell, and the door clanged shut behind him. The room was cold, with gray walls and a metal bench bolted to the floor. Alex sat down, his mind racing. He had faced tough situations before, but this felt different. This wasn't an undercover mission or a high-stakes operation. This was prejudice, plain and simple. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. Alex could hear muffled voices outside, but nobody came to check on him. He thought about his family, his colleagues, and the people who trusted him. He knew this situation wasn't just about him. It was a reflection of something bigger. Finally, an officer approached the cell. "You get one phone call," he said flatly. Alex stood and walked to the phone, his wrists still sore from the handcuffs. He dialed a number he knew by heart. "Agent Daniels." A familiar voice answered on the other end. "Daniels, it's Alex," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've been arrested. They didn't believe my ID. I'm at the downtown station." There was a pause, and then Daniels's voice hardened. "What? They arrested you? Don't worry, Alex. I'll handle this. Sit tight." Alex hung up the phone, relief washing over him. He trusted Daniels completely. If anyone could fix this mess, it was him. But as he returned to his cell, he couldn't help but wonder how far this mistake would go before the truth came out. Meanwhile, outside the station, the video of Alex's arrest was starting to spread. Bystanders had uploaded clips online, and the incident was already gaining attention. People were asking questions, and the city was beginning to take notice. Unbeknownst to Alex, his quiet determination and refusal to give in were about to ignite a storm no one could have predicted. Alex sat in the cold holding cell, his mind sharp despite the quiet frustration bubbling under the surface. He wasn't angry. He was determined. The call to Agent Daniels had been brief, but Alex knew Daniels wouldn't waste a second. The Secret Service didn't take these situations lightly. Alex had trained alongside Daniels for years and trusted his supervisor to do everything in his power to resolve the situation. Meanwhile, at the Secret Service headquarters, Agent Daniels was already in motion. He slammed the phone down and immediately alerted his team. "Carter's been arrested," he said, his tone serious. "They didn't verify his ID. We need to clear this up now." Daniels called the police station directly, demanding to speak to the commanding officer. The sergeant on duty, Sergeant Ramirez, answered the call. "This is Ramirez. What's the issue?" "The issue," Daniels said, his voice sharp, "is that one of my agents is sitting in your holding cell because your officers didn't bother to check his credentials. You need to release him immediately." Ramirez frowned. "We have procedures, sir. I'll need to look into this." "You don't need to look into anything," Daniels snapped. "You have a Secret Service agent in custody. A mistake that's already gaining attention online. If you don't handle this now, it's going to escalate quickly." Back at the station, Alex remained calm, but he could feel the shift in energy around him. Officers walked by his cell, some sneaking curious glances, while others avoided eye contact entirely. Alex didn't speak. He didn't need to. He knew the truth would come out soon enough. Outside the station, the situation was already spiraling. The videos of Alex's arrest were gaining traction online, with thousands of people sharing and commenting. Many were outraged, questioning how a simple misunderstanding could lead to such a drastic mistake. News outlets began picking up the story, reporters calling the station for statements. The sergeant's phone rang again, this time from the mayor's office. The mayor, aware of the growing public outcry, demanded answers. "What's going on at the station?" the mayor asked. "Why am I hearing about a federal agent being arrested?" Ramirez felt the pressure mounting. He called Officer Briggs and Officer Carter into his office. "What's the story with this guy in holding?" he asked, his tone firm. "He claimed he's Secret Service," Briggs said, shrugging. "But we had no way to confirm that." "You had his ID," Ramirez said, his frustration evident. "Did you even try to verify it?" Briggs hesitated. "We thought it might be fake." Ramirez shook his head. "Unbelievable. You need to fix this now." As the officers scrambled to gather the facts, Agent Daniels and his team arrived at the station. Daniels, dressed in his own sharp suit, walked in with authority. He demanded to see Alex, and when Ramirez came out to greet him, it was clear the sergeant knew the gravity of the situation. Alex was brought out of his cell, his expression calm but resolute. Daniels clapped a hand on his shoulder. "We're getting you out of here," he said. The officers stood awkwardly, realizing their mistake. But as Alex looked around, he could see this was bigger than an apology. The wheels of accountability had started turning, and this incident was far from over. Alex's quiet strength and Daniels's unwavering resolve were about to ensure this mistake would become a lesson no one would forget. The station had gone from its usual busy hum to an atmosphere of unease and tension. Officers whispered among themselves, stealing nervous glances at the tall man in the crisp suit standing at the front desk. Agent Daniels had arrived with a commanding presence, his badge gleaming as he laid it down firmly on the counter. "I need to see Agent Carter," Daniels said, his voice steady but firm. Sergeant Ramirez nodded quickly, gesturing for an officer to bring Alex out of the holding cell. Ramirez could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't just about a mistaken arrest anymore. It was about the fallout that was quickly spiraling beyond their control. As Alex was escorted into the room, his composure remained intact. His calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the tension around him. Daniels greeted him with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. "Alex," he said, "we're here to clear this up." Alex nodded. "I appreciate it. Let's get this straightened out." Ramirez cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to regain some control over the situation. "Agent Carter, we're deeply sorry for any misunderstanding," he began. "Our officers were following procedure." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Following procedure? Your officers had his credentials and still chose to ignore them. That's not procedure. That's negligence." The room fell silent. Alex spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "Mistakes happen, but this mistake could have been avoided if anyone had taken the time to verify my ID. Instead, I was treated as guilty without question." The tension in the room grew heavier as Daniels turned his attention back to Ramirez. "This isn't just an apology situation, Sergeant. Do you realize what's happening outside this station? This arrest is already making headlines." Ramirez shifted uncomfortably. He had seen the videos circulating online and knew the public outcry was growing. Protests were starting to form outside the station, with people demanding accountability for what they saw as clear racial bias. Meanwhile, the arresting officers, Briggs and Carter, were called into the room. Their expressions were a mix of defensiveness and unease. "You two need to explain yourselves," Ramirez said, his tone sharp. Briggs hesitated. "We were just doing our job." He matched the description of a suspect. "And you ignored his ID?" Daniels asked, his voice cold. "You dismissed his credentials because you assumed he was lying. That's not doing your job. That's making a biased judgment." Briggs opened his mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. Alex stepped forward, addressing them directly. "I don't hold personal grudges, but I do expect accountability. This isn't just about me. Mistakes like this erode trust in law enforcement and harm communities." Daniels nodded, his gaze unwavering. "And that's why this won't end here. There will be an investigation, and your department will answer for this." As the officers stood silent, the noise outside the station grew louder. Protesters held signs and chanted, their voices demanding change. The media had arrived, cameras flashing as reporters tried to capture the unfolding story. Alex looked at Daniels. This isn't just about setting the record straight. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to someone else. Daniels nodded. And we'll make sure of it. The realization had set in for everyone in the room. This was bigger than a simple apology. The truth was out, and the consequences were just beginning. The scene outside the police station was growing more chaotic by the minute. Protesters held signs with messages like, "Justice for all," and "End racial profiling." Their voices echoed through the street, calling for answers and accountability. Reporters with microphones and cameras stood at the edges of the crowd, capturing every moment for the evening news. Inside the station, the tension was just as high. Sergeant Ramirez had stepped away from the confrontation with Agent Daniels and Alex to take a series of increasingly frantic phone calls. The mayor, the police commissioner, and even representatives from the governor's office were demanding explanations. "Sergeant," one officer said hesitantly, stepping into Ramirez's office, "the media is requesting a statement. They want to know why we arrested a Secret Service agent." Ramirez pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on him. "We're not giving any statements until we get this under control," he snapped. "Tell them we'll address it soon." Back in the main hall, Alex and Daniels stood calmly, observing the disarray around them. Alex remained quiet, but his mind was racing. He could feel the eyes of the officers on him, some curious, others embarrassed. Daniels, on the other hand, was as composed as ever. "They're scrambling," Daniels said quietly to Alex. "They know they messed up, and now the whole world knows too." Alex nodded. "This isn't just about me anymore. People are paying attention. If this leads to real change, it'll be worth it." Outside, a young reporter named Lisa Rivera was live on the scene, her voice carrying over the chants of the crowd. "This is Lisa Rivera reporting live from the downtown police station, where protests have erupted after the wrongful arrest of Secret Service agent Alex Carter. Videos of the incident have gone viral, sparking outrage across the nation." Lisa gestured toward the crowd. "Protesters are demanding accountability from law enforcement and an end to racial profiling. Many are asking how such a mistake could happen to someone as prominent as a federal agent, and what this means for others who may not have the same platform to defend themselves." Back inside, Ramirez finally returned to face Daniels and Alex. His shoulders were slumped, his earlier confidence replaced with visible stress. "We're going to release you immediately," he said, avoiding Alex's gaze. "This was a misunderstanding, and we're deeply sorry." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "A misunderstanding? That's putting it lightly. You're lucky he's handling this with the grace he has. Most people wouldn't be so calm after what your department put him through." As Alex was handed his belongings, he addressed Ramirez directly. "I appreciate the release, but this can't stop here. This isn't just about an apology. It's about fixing the system that allowed this to happen." Ramirez nodded weakly, knowing Alex was right. "There will be a full investigation," he promised, though his words sounded hollow. As Alex and Daniels stepped outside the station, the crowd erupted into cheers. Alex raised a hand in acknowledgement, his face calm but resolute. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment as Alex approached the reporters. "This isn't just my story," Alex said, his voice clear and steady. "This is about the need for change. No one should be judged by their appearance or dismissed without proper consideration. I hope this incident sparks a conversation we all need to have." The crowd cheered again, and Alex felt a small sense of relief. But he knew the fight wasn't over. The world was watching now, and he was ready to make sure this moment led to something bigger. The evening sun cast long shadows across the crowded street outside the station. Protesters continued chanting, their energy unwavering, as Alex and Agent Daniels stood at the center of the media frenzy. Camera flashes lit up the scene as reporters scrambled to capture every word Alex had to say. Inside the station, Sergeant Ramirez gathered his team in the briefing room. The air was heavy with tension. Ramirez's face was pale as he addressed the officers. "We've made a mistake," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "We need to own up to it." Officer Briggs and Officer Carter sat at the back of the room, looking uncomfortable. Ramirez turned his gaze to them. "This started because you didn't follow procedure. Ignoring credentials and acting on assumptions doesn't just damage this department's reputation. It undermines the trust of the entire community." Briggs shifted in his seat. "We thought we were doing our job," he muttered. "He matched the description. He handed you federal ID." Ramirez snapped, cutting him off. "And you ignored it. That's not doing your job. That's failing it." The room fell silent. Ramirez rubbed his temples, then continued. "We'll be holding a press conference shortly. You two will be there, and you'll publicly apologize. There's no avoiding this." Meanwhile, outside, Alex remained calm as he answered reporters' questions. "Do you think this was an act of racism?" one reporter asked. Alex paused before responding. "I think it's more than just one incident," he said thoughtfully. "This is about a system that needs to do better. Assumptions based on appearance can lead to serious consequences. I'm lucky to have the platform to speak out, but many people don't." Daniel stood beside him, nodding in agreement. "This isn't just a local issue, it's a nationwide problem." What happened to Alex is a reminder that we still have work to do. The crowd cheered, and Alex felt a sense of unity. The people outside weren't just here for him, they were here for change. Inside the station, Ramirez stepped up to the podium in the press room. He adjusted the microphone and cleared his throat. Reporters immediately turned their cameras toward him. "Good evening," Ramirez began. "Today, this department made a grave mistake. We wrongfully arrested Agent Alex Carter, a respected member of the Secret Service, because of poor judgment and failure to follow protocol." He glanced at Briggs and Carter, who stood stiffly to his right. "I want to personally apologize to Agent Carter and to the community for this error. This does not reflect the values we strive to uphold." Briggs stepped forward reluctantly. His voice wavered as he spoke. "Agent Carter, I'm sorry for what happened. We made a mistake, and I take responsibility for my part in it." Outside, the press conference was broadcast live, and many in the crowd watched on their phones. Alex, standing among the protesters, listened to the apologies. While the words were a step in the right direction, he knew actions mattered more. After the press conference, Ramirez approached Alex personally. "I know words aren't enough," he said quietly. "We'll be conducting a full review of our practices and making changes." Alex nodded. "I hope you do. This isn't just about me. It's about preventing this from happening to anyone else." As the evening turned into night, Alex felt a mixture of exhaustion and hope. The apologies had been made, and the accountability process had begun. But deep down, he knew the journey to real change was just getting started. The days following Alex's release were a whirlwind of activity. The video of his arrest had spread far and wide, sparking debates on news channels, social media platforms, and even dinner tables. People from all walks of life were weighing in, sharing their outrage and demanding systemic change. For Alex, it was both overwhelming and humbling to see his experience ignite such a powerful response. The police department wasn't spared from the fallout. Public trust had been shaken, and the protests outside the station showed no signs of slowing down. Signs reading "Accountability Now" and "End Bias Policing" became a common sight on the news. Ramirez found himself at the center of scrutiny, tasked with not only repairing the department's reputation, but also addressing the root cause of the problem. Inside the department, changes were already underway. Ramirez called for an immediate review of all training procedures, focusing on implicit bias and proper verification protocols. "We can't afford another mistake like this," he told his team in a tense meeting. "Not for this department, and not for our community." Meanwhile, Alex found himself thrust into the spotlight in a way he had never imagined. Invitations poured in for interviews. panel discussions, and even speaking engagements. Despite his private nature, Alex understood the importance of sharing his story. This wasn't just about him. It was about using his platform to make a difference. At a televised town hall event, Alex sat alongside community leaders, activists, and law enforcement officials. The moderator turned to him. "Agent Carter, how do you feel about the public response to your story?" Alex leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "I'm grateful for the support, but this isn't just my story," he said. "What happened to me could, and does, happen to others. I had the privilege of being heard because of my position. Many don't. That's why we need to focus on creating systems that treat everyone fairly, regardless of who they are." The audience applauded, and Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just sharing his experience. He was helping to shine a light on a much larger issue. Back at the police department, Officer Briggs and Officer Carter faced disciplinary actions. They were temporarily suspended, pending the results of an internal investigation. While some officers defended their colleagues, others acknowledged the need for accountability. "We have to do better," one officer admitted in a private conversation with Ramirez. "This shook our entire department." The ripple effects of Alex's arrest also reached the mayor's office. The mayor announced plans to create a community advisory board aimed at fostering better communication between law enforcement and the public. "This is about rebuilding trust," she said at a press conference. "We need to ensure that every citizen feels safe and respected." For Alex, the journey wasn't over. He continued to work closely with Agent Daniels and other allies to push for broader reforms. "This can't just be about one department or one incident," Alex said during a meeting with advocacy groups. "This has to be about lasting change." As the days turned into weeks, Alex remained committed to the cause. He spoke with conviction and determination, knowing that his voice had the power to inspire action. Though the fallout from his arrest had been intense, Alex was hopeful. What had started as a painful mistake was transforming into an opportunity for growth and progress. And in that, Alex found a sense of purpose he hadn't expected but fully embraced. Weeks after the incident, Alex Carter's life had taken on a new rhythm. He balanced his duties as a Secret Service agent with his newfound role as a voice for change. Invitations to speak at schools, community events, and forums became regular occurrences. At first, it felt strange to step into the spotlight, but Alex realized the impact his story was having on people. One afternoon, Alex found himself addressing a packed auditorium at a local university. Students, professors, and members of the community filled the seats, eager to hear his perspective. Standing at the podium, Alex took a deep breath, scanning the attentive faces before him. "When I was wrongfully arrested, it wasn't just about me," he began. "It was about a system that still has blind spots. But what happened after, the outpouring of support, the demand for change, showed me that people care. And when people care, change is possible." The audience erupted into applause. Alex continued, sharing the steps being taken to address the issues highlighted by his experience. He spoke about the police department's new training programs, the mayor's community advisory board, and the importance of ongoing conversations about fairness and accountability. At the police department, those changes were slowly beginning to take shape. Officer training sessions now included experts who taught about implicit bias and cultural awareness. Community leaders were invited to join discussions on improving relations between officers and residents. Sergeant Ramirez, determined to rebuild trust, personally oversaw these efforts. "I made mistakes as a leader," Ramirez admitted during a televised interview. "But this situation has been a wake-up call for me and my department. We owe it to our community to do better." Despite the positive strides, there were challenges. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Some officers resisted the new training, arguing that it was unnecessary. In the community, skepticism lingered among those who had experienced years of mistrust. But Alex remained optimistic. "Change is never easy," he said in an interview, "but every step forward matters." One particularly memorable moment came when Alex received an email from a young boy named Marcus. Marcus wrote about how he'd seen the videos of Alex's arrest and how it inspired him to speak up at school about unfair treatment he had witnessed. "I was scared at first," Marcus wrote, "but then I thought about how you stayed calm and spoke the truth. It made me feel brave." Reading the email, Alex felt a wave of emotion. Marcus's words reminded him why he had chosen to share his story so openly. It wasn't about attention or recognition. It was about making a difference, one person at a time. Meanwhile, the protesters outside the police station began to dwindle. It wasn't because they had given up, but because they saw progress. The department's commitment to transparency and reform had started to ease tensions. Community members were invited to participate in discussions, and officers who showed resistance to change were being closely monitored. Alex knew there was still a long way to go, but the tide was turning. His story had sparked something powerful, a movement that couldn't be ignored. And while the road ahead would have its challenges, Alex was ready to face them head-on. As he walked out of the auditorium after his speech, surrounded by applause and gratitude, Alex smiled. He wasn't just a man who had experienced injustice. He was a catalyst for change, and he wasn't done yet. Months had passed since the day Alex Carter was wrongfully arrested, and life had changed for him in ways he never could have imagined. What began as a frustrating and humiliating experience had turned into a movement that reached far beyond the city where it all started. Alex had become a symbol of resilience, fairness, and hope for countless people. The changes within the police department were becoming more visible. Officers now attended mandatory workshops, learning about fair practices and how to approach situations without bias. The department's community advisory board was fully operational, holding regular meetings to address concerns and improve trust between law enforcement and residents. Sergeant Ramirez had taken a more active role in these changes. He personally met with community leaders, listened to their stories, and worked to implement their suggestions. "I can't erase the mistakes we made," Ramirez admitted during a public forum, "but I can promise that we're working to ensure they never happen again." Alex kept close tabs on these developments, feeling a sense of pride knowing his experience had sparked meaningful progress. However, he didn't stop there. His work extended far beyond his local community. He traveled to other cities, meeting with law enforcement agencies, advocacy groups, and schools, sharing his story and encouraging discussions about fairness and accountability. One evening, Alex stood on stage at a national conference for criminal justice reform. The room was filled with policymakers, activists, and law enforcement officials from across the country. As Alex took the microphone, the audience grew quiet, hanging on his every word. "When I was arrested, I could have chosen anger," Alex began, his voice calm but strong. "But instead, I chose to speak out, not just for myself, but for the countless others who faced similar injustices. My story is not unique, but it is a reminder that we can and must do better. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with conversations like these." The crowd erupted in applause, and Alex felt a deep sense of purpose. He had turned his personal pain into a platform for positive change, and the impact was undeniable. Back in his hometown, Alex continued to make a difference on a more personal level. He volunteered at youth programs, mentoring young people and encouraging them to believe in their own potential. "No matter where you come from or what challenges you face," he often told them, "you have the power to make a difference." One day, while leaving a local community center, Alex was approached by Marcus, the young boy who had written him an email months earlier. Marcus handed Alex a drawing he had made, showing a superhero wearing a suit and tie, standing tall in front of a crowd. "This is you," Marcus said with a shy smile. "You're like a hero to me." Alex knelt down, accepting the drawing with a smile. "Thank you, Marcus," he said. "But remember, you have that same strength inside you. Always stand up for what's right." As Alex drove home that evening, he reflected on how much had changed since that fateful day. His journey had been challenging, but it had also been rewarding. He had seen the power of determination, community, and the willingness to stand up for what's right. The story didn't end there, of course. For Alex, it was only the beginning of a lifelong mission to create a world where justice and fairness prevailed. And with every step he took, he carried with him the hope and determination of those who believed in a brighter future.